Welcome to a Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction fiscal microwebinar on completing a budget change request for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. The objectives for this webinar are that you will be able to identify the correct budget form for a budget change request, understand how to complete the budget change request form, know to whom you should submit the budget change request form, and know when budget change requests are due. Let's begin with some budget change request basics. First, you can find the correct form PI 9550IV-BREN, more commonly referred to as the budget change request form, on DPI's CLC website under Current Grantee Resources. You must use this form. Please be aware that converting the form to any other file type, such as a Google document, may interfere with the form's calculation functions, and you will be required to resubmit the form. Please work with your business office to complete any financial forms, including this one. Second, you need to submit a budget change request form only when a single line item increases or decreases by 10% or more. A line item is any row listed under the woofer object column heading. A budget change request form is also required to capture carryover. Carryover will be covered in a later webinar. Third, when you are ready to submit the form, send it via email to your CLC liaison, which you can again determine by visiting the DPI CLC website. Finally, the deadline for submitting a budget change request form is May 30th of the fiscal year during which you are proposing the budget change. The budget change request form is 2 pages. On the first page, you are required to complete some general contact information about your CLC and the rationale for submitting the form and making the proposed changes. You need to provide a detailed description of each change, including what each change is and why the change is being proposed. You must do this for both the line item increase and the line item decrease. Put another way, why are you wanting to increase one line and why are you able to decrease another? The more detail you can provide, the better, as such information may reduce the amount of follow-up DPI has to conduct. Page 2 of the budget change request form is the budget summary page, which has 2 main parts, the amount requested and the proposed revisions. Let's take a closer look at the different components of page 2. As a reminder, like the initial budget submitted with your application or most recently approved yearly progress report, otherwise known as the YPR, all line items are organized into 3 main categories or woofer function, which is the first column on page 2 of the budget change request form. Woofer stands for the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements and provides a uniform financial and accounting structure for public elementary and secondary schools in the state of Wisconsin. For the purpose of a budget change request, you need to make sure that CLC grant monies are in the appropriate woofer function or general category. These 3 categories include 1. Instruction, and instruction expenses are those dealing directly with the interaction between instructional staff and students and/or families. 2. Support services, pupil and instructional staff services. Pupil and instruction staff services expenses are those which facilitate and enhance instructional or other components of the grant. This category includes staff development, supervision, student transportation, and coordination of grant activities. And 3. Support services, administration. Administration expenses include general, building, business, central service administration, and insurances expenses. Should you have additional questions about woofer functions, please visit the DPI website to learn more. Woofer functions are further broken down into woofer objects, the second column on the form. These are your general expenditure categories. The woofer object is type of cost, meaning what you are buying and whom you are buying it from, whereas the function is the area or purpose it's for. The first column to be completed, and the third column on the form, is the amount requested column. The amounts listed here should be identical to the initially approved budget. If you are unsure what your most initially approved budget is, you can always contact your CLC liaison. The second column to be completed, and the 4th column on the form, titled First Revision, is where you should list your proposed budget changes. Importantly, your entire grant award should be allocated in this column, meaning you should not just list the line items you are changing. In other words, the total budget listed at the bottom of the form should equal your total grant award. The final column to be completed, the fifth column on the form, titled Second Revision, should be used in the event that you'd like to submit a second budget change request. In this case, all columns that can be filled should be filled, with the amount requested being your initially approved budget, the first revision being your most recently approved budget change request, and the second revision being your second request. If you need to exceed 2 budget requests in a fiscal year, you should continue to shift the revision columns appropriately. For example, if you are submitting a third budget change request, put your most recently approved budget in the first revision column and your proposed changes in the second revision column. The amount requested column should always remain your initially approved budget. The final optional part of the budget change request form to be completed is the indirect costs approved rate cell. Indirect costs are part of the system by which a subrecipient can determine its cost of doing business and recover that amount from the CLC grant. Examples of such costs are accounting, auditing, payroll, personnel, and budgeting. The local education agency, otherwise known as the LEA, or other agency may have an indirect cost rate that has been negotiated with the state and that determines the percentage of indirect costs that can be allocated to the grant. You can determine if your agency has an indirect cost rate and what that rate is by visiting the DPI webpage and searching for indirect costs. If you choose to claim indirect costs, you cannot exceed the restricted rate as posted, but you can claim less than that percent. So what happens after you submit the form? Budget change request forms go through several stages of approval. First, your CLC liaison will review the request rationale and compare the proposed changes to your grant application's program plan and goals, looking for alignment. For example, if a proposed change includes an increase in non-capital objects to purchase STEM equipment, but there is no mention of STEM in the site's program plan, you can expect follow-up from a DPI consultant. If the proposed budget changes adequately reflect the site's program plan, your CLC liaison will then review the rationale and line items to determine that the proposed revisions are reasonable and necessary. For example, if there is a proposed increase in salaries to lower the staff-to-student ratio in the program, with the intention of providing more opportunities for youth to build positive non-parental guardian relationships, a DPI consultant will likely approve this change. The last point of consideration for your CLC consultant is whether the proposed changes are allowable per federal and state guidelines. A few common areas of review include the purchase of food, which is generally not allowed, capital objects, which are generally not allowed, with the exception of a vehicle lease, and the rule that CLC monies may only be used to supplement, not supplant, existing services. Once a CLC consultant approves your budget change request form, it is handed off to the CLC's grants specialist, who conducts a second review for compliance and accuracy. Once the grants specialist approves the budget change request form, you will be notified via email. At this point, any fiscal reimbursement claims you submit to the CLC accountant will be reviewed and processed per this newly approved budget. This micro-webinar on submitting a budget change request form is now complete. Should you have any questions, please contact a CLC consultant or the CLC grants specialist, or visit the CLC website.